The Union Cabinet on Friday has approved the new income tax bill, which is likely to be presented in the Lok Sabha this week. Some reports also suggest that it could be tabled today. The bill is part of a broader push to reform the Indian taxation system. The new legislation, which is often referred to as the Direct Tax Code, is aimed at overhauling the existing tax structure, making it more streamlined and transparent. Remember, the bill is likely to be referred to the Standing Committee for further discussion and refinement of its provision. So what will the bill really focus on? Here's what we have been able to decipher so far. Well, the new income tax bill is likely to be a simplified language for better understanding of the tax structure. In addition to that, there's likely to be focus on increased compliance and reduced ambiguity, both in the language and the clauses referred to in the bill. There is likely to be scope for rationalizing the tax rate, even as budget after budget tax slabs could potentially change. Add to that, minimizing legal disputes which often arise out of the complexity of the 60-year-old tax bill is likely to be done away with. Building trust in the taxpayer as well as in the overall administrative process, this is something that the new tax bill proposes to offer, at least if you go by what Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said in her budget speech. Then there is also likely to be clearer definitions of exemptions, limits and liabilities of the taxpayers. Add to that, alignment of the Indian tax code with the global standards is something that the new tax bill would likely focus on. And then, of course, the government's focus on the middle class and ease of filing tax returns. That is something that we could see coming through by way of the new tax bill. And then clarity on new tax slabs across the old and new tax regime is something that we can expect from the new tax bill. Then let's try and understand these issues better and decipher what the new tax bill could mean for you, the tax-paying middle-class citizen living in India. I have with me this morning Karanjot Singh, partner Lakshmikumaran and Sridharan joining in. Karanjot, good morning. Good to have you on News 9. Help us understand, what do you make of what is likely to be the changes in the new tax bill as opposed to the 60-year-old act which is in existence right now?
Yeah, good morning to all the viewers. So yes, as you said, I think the old act, it's been in existence for about 65 years now. It was felt increasingly that the old act was complicated. The languages were difficult to understand. There were explanations, there were provisos, and the act had become very voluminous. It was also felt that the act was acting as a deterrent to inviting fresh investments into India, because even the investors were feeling that there were no alternate dispute resolutions mechanism, and it was extremely difficult to ensure the stringent compliances that were currently in place. Many of them had come because of the legacy that the act had brought in. So the new act, as we understand from what has been stated by the Honorable Finance Minister up till now, is going to be half in terms of length, as also the chapters as compared to the existing law. We also understand that the differential rate regime as it existingly exists between different individuals, firms, companies, etc., there could be some sense of rationalization there, and that the rates could broadly be truncated between individuals and other persons. On top of that, we are also expecting that the Act may align with certain global standards, and the government may also be looking in integrating the BEP solution into the new Act in the near future as well.
There's a lot of clarity likely to emerge for tax lawyers like yourself and people who understand and read the finer print of the tax law, Karanjot. But what does it really mean for the tax-paying citizen? Is there going to be something in it for the middle class, which is pretty much doing the heavy lifting of paying direct income taxes? What comes by way of the new tax bill for the citizen of the country?
See, one thing that is clear is that the government is paying a lot of attention to the middle class. I think the recent budget and the slab rate changes thereof are a testimony to that fact. Now, as far as the new bill is concerned, I believe the fact that if the language is simplified and the explanation provisos are removed and everything is stuck into simple subsections and truncating the language for each section, I think that will really make things easier to understand, not only for tax lawyers like me, but for public at large. Specific to middle class, I think we'll have to wait and see how things pan out. But I believe if the government still carries on the slab rates that were proposed in the budget for the longer run, that will be a big win for the middle class altogether.
And can the tax bill theoretically do away with the old tax regime? Because that is also something which has been a bit of a concern for those who continue to opt for the old tax regime by way of filing their taxes. Can the tax bill alone get rid of the old tax regime? Because if you remember, the budget was absolutely silent on the old tax regime.
You're absolutely right. See, it is very much possible. So, as of now, the old tax regime technically does not exist in Income Tax Act. It exists in the Finance Act. And every year we continue to see the slab rate changes to those as well. The deductions that are available in the old tax regime, they find place in the Income Tax Act. Now, we must remember that it has been the scheme and a phased movement for this government to do away with the complicated deduction-oriented schemes and to move forward with one simple tax regime. We saw it happening for corporates in 2019 and we saw it happening for individuals. And the government has repeatedly made attempts to make the new regime more lucrative. I'll not be surprised that if not in the new direct tax code, the government in the near future may end up doing with one simpler regime with lower reductions but increased threshold limits for paying taxes.
All right. Another aspect that we have seen come under discussion multiple times in the last 1 year or so, if memory serves me right, Karanjot, is the fact that the finance minister has often cited building trust with the taxpayer as one of the key tenets of the finance policy of the country. What is the trust deficit right now with respect to the existing Income Tax Act, and how does this trust issue get mitigated with the new tax bill?
So, see, it's been a long run. Between the taxman and the taxpayer, it's a game of cat and mouse. The taxman will always believe that the taxpayer end up devising tax saving schemes and they don't pay their legitimate share of taxes, while the taxpayer will always feel that the taxmen give them a rough hand and they try and recover excessive taxes. Now, in this race, if you look at it, it is always perceived from the taxpayer side that the government that with the government there is a sense of trust deficit, that even when the taxpayers are trying to be compliant, they are slapped with high pitched assessments and there are huge recoveries that are intended to be made against them. Now, again, in keeping that in mind, what the government has been trying to do is to bring in alternate dispute resolution mechanisms of the likes of filing updated returns to provide an opportunity to the taxpayers to go back and revisit the positions wherever needed and not litigate with the government. At the same front, I also remember government bringing in provisions granting immunity from penalties where the taxpayers agreed to settle their disputes. Another example would be the Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, which the government has been bringing time and again, allowing the taxpayer to settle the disputes with the government. So there
Okay.
does seem to be a lot of thrust on building trust with the taxpayers by giving them opportunities to settle the disputes rather than getting into protracted litigation with the government. I do hope that the scheme does codify some of these provisions and carry forwards from this, providing better mechanisms to the taxpayers, because at the end of it, all taxpayers want certainty, not litigation.
All right. And talking about litigation and certainty, Karanjot, there's also this clause of penalty which has been a fairly contentious one, given the fact that there are penalties up to 300% of the proposed or the estimated tax evasion. Do you think the penalty clauses in the new tax bill need to be relooked at, and would they have been relooked at, and is there merit in considering a lower tax penalty so that there is greater compliance even for those who erroneously or intentionally went ahead and did not file taxes correctly?
See, look, we have to understand more things more from a taxpayer standpoint while ensuring that people who are intentionally evading taxes, they are also penalized. So what I would rather want is for government to identify certain cases and restrict the higher tax penalties only for select category of cases where there are intentional tax evasions, people engaging in accommodation entries and things like that. So the higher tax penalties can be reserved only for those limited category of cases. Whereas I think in cases where there are just difference of interpretation claims, etc., we should be looking at a scheme where either no penalties are imposed or nominal penalties are imposed. On top of it, I believe it should be at the forefront of the government to decriminalize many of the existing penal actions. That is to again bring in more confidence with the taxpayers. I think, especially in cases where the tax differences are arising only on account of interpretational differences, prosecutions, etc., are clearly unwarranted, and the government should be looking to do away with those as well.
All right. There are also talks, Karanjot, about the global standards being introduced in the new income tax bill. What are these global standards, and what is it? What is the best tax code available that we can actually draw inspiration from here for India?
So the first and the forefront, what I look at is are the Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 recommendations which were given by OECD. Many of the European countries have ended up opting for these. Both of these, they grant some right back to the source country to tax the income of certain multinational enterprises, and also provide for a minimum global tax rate. Now, what we have seen of lately is that the America has really pulled out of this deal, and India has really said that they will sit back and see how the global scenario pans out around surrounding these. I think it's a little too early to say whether in the direct tax code the government will be opting for it. If I were to bet, maybe at this stage not. India will sit back and look how the global scenario pans out, especially with America pulling out of the deal once Trump has come into power.